Hey, 110 students, I'm back. We're talking about Chapter 5, which is Forms of Business Ownership. You'll need this for discussion board 4. So when we talk about forms of business ownership, that means when you set up your business, what are you going to be? Are you going to be a sole proprietor? Are you going to be a partnership? Are you going to go all the way into the big leagues and be a corporation or a limited liability corporation? Lots of different choices here, and they each have different consequences. So some of the stuff gets pretty technical and is beyond the scope of this introductory course when we start getting into tax law and things of that nature. But understanding the basic differences will help you out for that discussion board. So let's talk about some of the main different types. First up, you have sole proprietor. So sole proprietor is really you're filing as an individual. So there's no difference between you, your individual tax returns, and your business. So to be a sole proprietor, all you have to do is set up a business license. You can go down to the county office and buy a business license. You can go on LegalZoom and set up your sole proprietorship with a business license, and you're good to go. And when you're a sole proprietor, you get to keep all the profits. You own your own business. It sounds very attractive. It's the easiest to set up, and many small businesses like dog walkers and copywriters, work from home businesses are sole proprietorships. So it's the most common form of business ownership. However, it does come with some cons, some negatives. Unlimited liability. Your personal assets are at risk. So in the event that something bad happens with your business, say a customer sues you, say somebody gets hurt at your business and you get sued and it's beyond the scope of your business insurance, your personal assets are at risk, meaning your house, your car, any other investments that you have, those are not protected from lawsuits or business losses. Debtors can go after your personal assets, unlimited liability. It takes an enormous amount of time to be a sole proprietor. You're doing all the scopes of the business, managing, marketing, operations, finance, billing. So it's a huge time commitment, and what I hear from most sole proprietors, and I've worked with some, is it's exhausting and it's overwhelming to be a sole proprietor, especially as your business grows. It's harder to get funding as a sole proprietor. That's where we'll look at like corporations. They're better set up to seek funding from outside sources. It's easier to have people come in as part owners of the business when you're not a sole proprietor. And if you as a sole proprietor die, your business dies with you. You are the business. So that's a sole proprietor. Next up, we have partnerships. So partnerships, there's 2 or more people involved in the business. And there's some advantages here. Obviously, divisions of labor, divisions of skills and talent. One person might be good at finance, the other one's good at marketing, and collectively those 2 skills play together nicely. So there's more resources. However, it's much like a marriage in the sense that when there's disagreements, it can get very dicey and difficult to unwind. So what if one partner wants to sell the business and the other one doesn't? How do you deal with that? Do you have to buy that other partner out? That can be very expensive if the business has grown a bit. Or they go in different directions as far as how they want to take the business. Or there's different amount of work contribution. Partner disagreements are a very common thing in a partnership setup. Also, you still have this concept of unlimited liability in a partnership setup, meaning that your personal assets are still at risk for both of the general partners in the business. Now, there's 2 types of partners in a partnership. There's a general partner and there's a limited partner. General partner are the partners in a business who are responsible for operating the business on a day-to-day business. They're running the business essentially. So if you have a hand in the business and you're running the business, you're going to be classified as a general partner. Your personal assets are at risk. There's a second kind of partner, and really it's just an investment partner, and that's a limited partner. It could be a rich uncle or aunt or somebody who gave you some money towards your business. They're just funding the business. They're not actively involved in running the business. They just gave you some funds. That's a limited partner. In the event of a lawsuit, their personal assets would not be at risk. They would only lose the portion of money that they invested in the business. So understand general versus limited partner. Bottom line, partnerships, more division of labor. However, you really need to know who you're getting in business with from a partnership standpoint, because disagreements are very common. They are very hard to terminate. There are oftentimes disagreements. There are issues with how you divvy up profits. And your personal assets, unlimited liability, are still at risk for the general partners in a partnership. Next up, going into the big guys, we have our corporations. So here we have our C Corps and our S Corps, and even limited liability corporations. But the two I really want you to focus on and drill down on in the chapter is S Corps and C Corps. Now, C Corps are what we think of when we think of a corporation, an Inc., right? So that's a big company. It's oftentimes they sell stock. And if you incorporate, it's often with the intention that you're going to grow the business and sell stock and try to make the business a very large entity. That is a reason why you would set up as a corporation. Now, you can change your form of business ownership. You can start as a sole proprietor, maybe bring in a partner, and then you become a partnership, and then later on as the business grows, you can change again and become a corporation. So it's not a static thing when you set up your business. You can change. Incorporations are more complex. There's a lot of paperwork. You have to file reports with the Security and Exchange Commission. Usually you want to hire a lawyer to set up your documents. You can try to incorporate on LegalZoom.com or some of these do-it-yourself sites, but it's definitely more complicated. Essentially, if you want to be a typical C corporation, which stands for conventional corporation, your intent is to go public and sell stock. And that's why you would want to be a C Corp. The lesser known corporation is the S Corp. So the S Corp, and that's just the tax code for the type of corporation it is, S Corp. The S Corp is still a corporation, and there's still shareholders, and all forms of corporation, by the way, have limited liability, meaning there's now a firewall between you, the person running the business, or somebody involved in the business and the assets of that business. So if the business gets sued, if there's debtors trying to collect on debts on the business, if you go bankrupt, those debtors, those people suing you cannot go after your personal assets. They can only go after the assets of the company. So here we have the concept of limited liability, which is one of the big attractions to being a corporation. Your personal assets as you individual are not at risk if the company goes sideways and if there's debts or bankruptcies. So that's one of the big advantages of a corporation. However, there's double taxation. You get taxed twice. That's a tax discussion to have. But back to the S Corp. So with the S Corp, you still have shareholders, but they have to be U.S. citizens. If you're a C Corp, you can have investment houses, international people, pretty much anybody or anything, an institutional investor, an insurance company, a pension fund, can invest in your company. With an S Corp, it has to be an actual human being, and it has to be a U.S. citizen. And you can only have 100 members in an S Corp. Now, one of the nifty things about an S Corporation is there's some tax advantages to an S Corp. And that's kind of beyond the scope of this class, but payroll tax is a very expensive tax that corporations have to pay. And if you're an S Corp, you can pay yourself a payroll, a salary. Now you pay tax on that, and there's withholdings, state and federal, and Medicare, and Social Security, and all that kind of stuff. So those are expensive from a tax base. And you can also do distributions. So with an S Corp, you have the option of taking some of the profits of the company and funneling them off to your members, the shareholders of the company. That can be yourself as an employee. You can have an employee of one, by the way, in an S Corp. You can give yourself some profits in the form of a distribution. Now, why is that a good thing? You're drawing a salary, and you can also get a distribution from the profits. Well, payroll tax, you're taxed at, the company pays the payroll tax, and then the person getting the salary also gets income tax on that money. And that's pretty expensive. Depending on how much money you make, 35% tax rate on your income from the personal person standpoint. On a distribution, when that's distributed to a shareholder, a member of the S Corp, that's taxed at the capital gains rate, which is significantly lower. depending upon, again, your income and stuff, but the capital gains rate is around 20%. So it's a nifty way, and you don't have to pay all the payroll tax as a company. So it's a nifty way to reduce your taxes significantly, dodging some of the Uncle Sam tax stuff by being an S Corp. Now, the government's always working around this to try to make sure that people aren't dodging that, and you have to claim a, quote, reasonable salary. You can't be the CEO of an S Corp, a large S Corp, and pay yourself $1. You have to have a reasonable salary for what would make sense for that position. But the balance of that money, you can give yourself a distribution and at a lower tax rate. So there's some advantages there. Okay, so sole proprietor, partnership, corporations, S Corp and C Corp. The concept of unlimited liability for sole proprietor and partnership, and the protection of limited liability if you're a corporation, S Corp, C Corp, or even a limited liability corporation, which we're not going to cover. And then lastly, you also have franchises. So franchise isn't really necessarily a form of business ownership, but you're buying into an existing business model. It's a McDonald's, it's a Subway's, it's a Supercuts, it's a Jiffy Lube, it's a Meineke Muffler. So these are franchise operations where you're essentially buying yourself a business and you're following their business model. Franchises have a higher success rate because they already have a brand established. They already have a distribution and purchasing network set up. They know how to do everything from making signs to putting in cash registers and the myriad of things that you have to do when you're starting a business. And it's very hard to start all that from scratch versus buying into an existing business model like a Subway. So they have a higher success rate. Now, what you should know is it's very expensive to buy a franchise. I used to work for Jack in the Box, and I had 18 franchise operations as part of my region when I was a regional marketing manager, and I had to meet with those franchise owners who owned their Jack in the Box. But to buy a Jack in the Box franchise is upwards of $1 million. Now that's financed through the headquarters, but you're running that business. So if you got a franchise in the early days when it was inexpensive, it can be a really strong cash cow for you. But the main advantage of a franchise, existing business model with a proven track record. Main disadvantage, you have to abide by the franchise agreement, meaning you have to do exactly what they say you have to do. You have to sell what they tell you can sell. You have to give part of your funds into the marketing budget, and you don't have a lot of freedom in how you operate that business. So check that out, because your question on that from the discussion board is, what are some of the new franchise models out there? And that's your research question. All right, gang, that's it for Chapter 5. Thanks for listening.